Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts, Shannon Lane, New Mark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, and Matthew Shapiro from Obermeyer, the law firm in Philadelphia. Let's see. Matthew, will you please give us a rundown on who we have on the air today, please?
I'd love to, Herb. We're starting off with Kip Anthony, the president and CEO of EFE. Then we have Bob Dick, the president of Precis Engineering. Following that, we have Tony DeRay, CEO of BSI Corporate Benefits. And we're wrapping up with Chris Pruitt, president and CEO of East Penn Manufacturing.
Let's get to know our first guest, Kip Anthony, president and CEO of EFE. Kip, what is EFE? What are you guys doing?
EFE is a contract manufacturer where we go and we build the product for companies so that companies can focus on their core issues of design, marketing, and servicing their customers.
How large or how small is your team, and how long have you guys been around?
We've been around since 1961, and the team is around 70 people right now.
Okie dokie. Where are you from originally? And what was the population of that town when you grew up?
I'm from Pella, Iowa, and the population of the community is around 9,000 people.
Mm-hmm. So you grew up in Iowa, 9,000 people in your community. How many brothers and sisters, where are you in the pecking order?
I'm the oldest of two.
Mm-hmm. And what was the 8 to 14 years old? What were the primary things you were up to 8 to 14?
I was living on the farm with livestock and wrestling in the schools.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Kip, so Iowa wrestling, they go together. Tell us about that experience and what it was like wrestling in Iowa.
Well, it was the only right choice for a sport. I mean, that's a given. For me, it was always a battle. I was a small 80-pound individual, and of course, you go up through heavyweights. So for me, wrestling was fun. It was a passion. It was also an opportunity to have some friends that were, let's say, in the school system, bigger, and provided a level of protection for myself, in all honesty.
What kind of lessons do you learn wrestling?
You learn wrestling, you learn to be tough. You learn to be tenacious. You learn to be disciplined, and you learn hard work.
And are these like life lessons that have helped you as a leader?
Absolutely. Small example. When you are in a practice and you practice against everybody in the team, when you weigh 80 some pounds and you're going against a heavyweight, you're not just automatically successful in that. You have to try different tactics until you survive. Single leg, not happening. Fireman's carry, definitely not happening. Double leg, maybe.
Perfect. Matthew.
Kip, you said you grew up on a farm around livestock. What did you like doing best on the farm? What did you spend the most time with?
The horses were my favorite in the livestock. Horses, you could chase the cows, which was kind of fun. We'd herd them for our neighbors and other people. So, you go and you watch John Wayne in the Saturday afternoon matinee, and then you go and you live it.
And you said it was your job to take care of how many horses was it?
About 23.
You said it was your job to take care of all those horses. How'd you get that job?
My father, I think, had gotten tired of taking care of the 23 horses. And so when I came to a certain point where he thought it was reasonable, he went and he said, here's a responsibility. Here's a job description. This is what I'm willing to compensate you. What do you think about that? And I realized that it was, right answer. So I said, hey, love it. And so then from 7 on, I was doing that.
And what did you learn from the way your father gave you that job description and that responsibility?
Be concise, outline what you expect and what you're willing to give and, compensation for the effort.
And now tell us the story about being dragged by a horse. How does that go?
Oh, God.
I had a mile.
A quarter mile, yeah. I had this fiery little pure black animal named Midnight. And she, for whatever reason, from the moment I bought her, she would always try to buck me off every time there was a test as to who the boss was. And anyways, one time I was riding her, and a saddle has a cinch. It holds the saddle into place. A front and back cinch in this case. The front cinch broke, and so the saddle swung underneath the horse, and I got my foot stuck in stirrup. And so I'm drug along through the pasture with her running all out for about a quarter of a mile. I end up with hoof prints and everything else. Finally, the saddle totally disintegrates. It's scattered over a quarter of a mile. Horse runs back to the barn, and I'm rather disgusted with myself. I tromp my way back over to the barn to the horse, and I'm not about to let that horse have had that victory. So I grab a bridle, slap it back on the horse, and I climb on the horse bareback. My spin on it was, doggone saddle failed. It wasn't my failure, and I never rode that horse again with a saddle, and I never got bucked off by that horse again.
What would that teach you? What's that tell us about you in business?
Oh, boy, it's okay to fail and then change your strategy.
Mm-hmm. Also, you have guts, because for you to get back on that horse without a saddle, it shows you've got guts. Shannon.
Tell us a little bit about your mom and what she was like when you were growing up.
My mom provided a lot of balance. I come from a family of engineers, and so very rational individuals. And my mom provided balance in the emotional intelligence side and also on the spiritual side, to look at the world through a lens that it was broader than just the raw inputs you might get as an engineer or as a highly rational human being.
Tell us more about that. How did she show you the spiritual side?
She would go and she would facilitate conversations that might not happen otherwise, talking about things in terms that were possibly different, to go and to open up the idea it was safe and it was okay to have those conversations. And then she would start to interject some of the things from her life and the way she perceived the world. And then we found that we could go and we had common ground, and we'd start to talk about how faith fits in, how some things aren't easily rationally explained in life, and that it's okay that you accept that there's some things we don't have to totally understand, that we can simply accept for what they are.
And how does faith play a role in your life today as president and CFO of EFE? There are days that, I think that I maybe have a problem. Maybe I'm not capable of this problem. Maybe I'm at the point of where I and myself can handle it. And I'll go in moments sit there and say, I'll pray to go and be smarter than I am, to be more capable than I am, and to make the best decision I possibly can to support those with me and to fulfill my responsibility of my role in the way that is more effective than I might be able to do in and of myself.
You're telling us that you have this responsibility to stick with stuff like you did working with those 23 horses, but on the other hand, you also have questions. You don't think you're the smartest guy on the team, do you?
I know I'm not the smartest guy on the team, and that's okay. I have to take in everybody's input and homogenize it into something that's workable, and take instinct and layer that over it, and the faith pieces laid over, and then see what comes out. Earlier,
when we were talking in the green room, Drew asked you a question about the kitchen table, and what was that? What were the discussions around the kitchen table like? You mentioned something about aspirations and hopes. What was that?
We would talk about, sometimes in the context, we would talk about the news. My father's part of the family, they were in the press and they own newspapers. And so we talk about the news, we talk about the news in the context then of what our aspirations were, where we thought we might go, how we'd like to fit in, how we'd like to make a difference. And those would become the foundation in looking at the day's events and how we'd like to be able to impact things.
True. Where do you want to go with that?
Yeah, I was just curious, like in those wrestling matches, I was trying to take myself back to the small town in Iowa. Did your mom and dad in the community show up at these matches?
My dad would show up. My mother couldn't stand to watch him. It terrified her. But my dad would. Well, my dad was actually a state champion in Iowa 2 years running. So, for him, there was a lot of passion in it.
What did that mean to you to look over and see Pop sitting there cheering you on?
responsibility. I knew what his capabilities were. I knew where he came from. And so I went, and it drove me to try to fulfill expectations, I suppose.
What's that fulfilling expectations have to do with running this business and keeping customers happy?
Yeah.
And the team.
It's all about fulfilling expectations.
Tell me a little bit. We're running out of time, but we'd love to have you come back again. What's the website address for this organization known as EFE?
EFElabs.com.
Let me have that one more time.
EFElabs.com.
We've been speaking with Kip Anthony, President and CEO of EFE, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders, executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. And please stick around. Don't go away. We will be back in a moment right after this quick break. Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. And we would like to introduce our guest, Bob Dick, president of Precis Engineering. Bob, what is Precis Engineering? What are you guys doing?
We are a full-service engineering company that serves the life science and pharmaceutical industries.
Mm-hmm. How large or how small is this organization, and how did you get a job with it?
Well, we're a 100-person firm. We have offices in Ambler, it's our headquarters, North Carolina, and a single office in San Diego.
How did you get a job with this company?
I was the co-founder of the business.
So where are you from originally?
I grew up in Tarsdale, which is a little area in Philadelphia, blue-collar area, row house kind of area.
Mm-hmm. Blue-collar row house. How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm the youngest. I have two sisters.
Two older sisters, all right.
Correct.
And 8 to 14, what were you up to?
Well, I was playing sports in the street, and I was building a boat with my dad. That occupied a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. Drew, give me a hand, please.
Bob, tell us more about that, building a boat with your dad. What do you mean?
Well, so we went to Rockland, Maine. We bought a hull and deck, and we finished everything inside of it. So it was a sailboat, woodwork, wiring, poured lead 25 pounds at a time as ballast in the boat.
How long did this take?
20 years.
Wow, 20 years. And what do you remember most about this time with your dad building this boat?
Well, it was there was nothing you didn't learn how to do. So if you had never run wire or made connections before, you learned how to do it. Everything was in play, and my dad was a CB in the Navy, and so had a very whatever it is, we'll figure out how to do it mentality. There was nothing we couldn't do. And
how did that translate into what you do today?
Well, I think it today it helps with starting a business and going in uncharted territory, not really knowing what to do or how to do it, but having the confidence that you'll figure it out.
It seems like even like your customers, like every situation's different, right?
It is exactly what we do today. Going in and solving problems, technical issues, the systems that we design are the most complicated in the buildings, and, being able to figure those out, have the confidence to trust your instincts there is really important.
Matthew?
Bob, you said, if I got you right, you said you spent 20 years every weekend working on this boat with your dad. Did you resent having to spend all that time on the boat?
A little bit, when your friends were outside playing wireball and you were, in a hot boat pouring lead, not always that much fun. But I think, I look back on it today and I think it really helped form me.
What do you mean by that? How did it help form you?
Well, I think, the ability to create something, I think is something I cherish. To be able to start with a clean piece of paper and generate something, to really create something is incredibly rewarding.
And you said you started working with your dad beyond the boat too, right?
I did. I was able to get a job with my dad's firm. He was a civil engineer, and I worked all through high school and all through college in IT group, accounting department. I got to see all the different portions of the business, including hand drafting and that kind of stuff.
And what does all that time going to work with him teach you that you use today?
Well, I truly understood all the different portions of the business. So going from, not just being an engineer and solving engineering problems, but understanding the business side of the business. And, we are very proud to be a business partner as opposed to just, a delivery of something. There's a lot of different ways to solve problems, and you need to look at all the different pieces of the business to solve those problems.
And having talked a little bit about your dad, I'm going to change gears because you told us you grew up with 3 moms. What's that all about?
Well, I had two much older sisters, and we all had jobs. Everybody took turns doing different things, and they taught me a lot of respect and a lot of the.
What do you mean they taught you respect?
Well, you're never allowed to hit your sister. You needed to treat everybody with respect throughout the house. And being the youngest, you got pushed around a little more than everybody else did.
So how'd they teach you the respect?
Well, I think it really came down to, understanding that everybody's stuff needed to be done. Everything that was done around the house was important. All of the house chores were important. And, there was no separation of who did what. Everybody had to pitch in.
What did that have to do with building this 100-person business?
Well, I think the business as it grows, you need to pitch in. You need to understand what everybody does. My job in the business is to really help fill the gaps, to help coach, to help mentor, to understand what people are doing, how they're doing it. I mean,
that's what Matthew told us about running a law firm. It's the same kind of stuff, Bob?
It is. And the thing that I would say that I pride myself on is my goal is to make you more successful with us than you would have been on your own. So
Perfect.
It's the ability to really help coach those things.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
Bob, you spent a lot of time both going to work with your dad and working on this boat with your dad. I'm curious, when you weren't doing that, what was going on for fun? What were you up to?
Well, I think, that really happened in high school. I started playing ice hockey, and, that was a very close-knit group of people. Ice hockey's not, football, baseball, or basketball. It's not one of the big three. It's, but, because of that, it was a very tight-knit group. And, I was a defenseman on the team, and, being a defenseman is a pretty selfless position. You're not the goalie, you're not the last stop, but you have to get out of the zone fast. You have to get back and make sure you defend the play. And it's selfless, I think.
And in the green room, you mentioned being part of the team was really important to you. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think being able to support the other people on the team, being able to know when to talk to somebody about a play they missed, when to prop somebody up when they're upset that they missed a pass or, something happened. It's bigger than just you, right? It's not about no player could win the game on their own, but you could certainly lose the game on your own. So
the idea of selflessness keeps coming up with you. How does that relate to what you're doing today?
Well, I think it's about, the business isn't about me, right? It's about supporting all of our staff and being able to grow our staff. I mean, we are truly more successful as a group than any of us would be individually. And I think, that support mechanism, that growth mechanism, to help people grow is is really what it's about.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that as a kid, this circle you hung out in was usually older than you. What are you talking about? And you mentioned you still get together with some of these folks. I don't get that.
I do. So, if you're 14 and you're working in an engineering company, most of the other people are 20 or 21. And, that's a big age spread then, but it's a small age spread now. And I was, I've been blessed to be able to go sit with my dad and his coworkers who are all retired and, kind of get a different view of the world. Things that today are life and death, 30 years from now are funny stories. And I think, if it can be funny then, it can be funny now.
Interesting. So we shouldn't take ourselves as seriously. You also mentioned earlier that you paid attention to your instincts. I thought business was blood, guts, engineering, architecture, cut and dry, black, white, math. What are you talking about instincts?
No, it's really anything but that. I mean, these projects are supporting other people's businesses. It's their livelihood. It's their it's their life, right? So we need to approach it in just that way. There's not always the right solution. It's about bringing the right solution at the right time, and a lot of that is instinctual, right? I mean, if you've solved problems your whole life, your approach to it can't just be go right at the wall. Sometimes you have to go around it. Sometimes you got to go above it. Mm-hmm. You just have to go a different way.
It's like building that boat when you were a kid. What's the website address of this organization known as Precis Engineering?
It is Precis, Precis engineering.com, all one word.
Let me have that one more time.
Precis, Precis engineering.com, all one word.
We've been speaking with Bob Dick, president of Precis Engineering here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, stick around. We'll be back in a moment right after this break. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Tony DeRay, who's CEO of BSI Corporate Benefits. Tony, what is BSI Corporate Benefits? What are you doing?
BSI is an independent benefits consulting firm. We have offices in Detroit, Michigan, here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where I'm at today. We take care of all the healthcare spend for companies on behalf of their employees.
How large or how small is this organization, and how'd you get a job with them?
We have 30 employees, and I founded BSI in 2003.
You founded the business. Where are you from originally?
From Mifflinville, Pennsylvania, a small town, northern tip of the coal region.
How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother.
Okie dokie. Drew, give me a hand with him, please.
Tony, it sounds like sports was like a big part of your upbringing, and specifically basketball. Tell us a little about how you got started playing basketball.
So my father was a teacher and coach 40 years. He was a great basketball player himself, but he was a basketball coach. So in the summers as a teacher, he got to make extra money, and he ran basketball camps. And my brother and I packed the bags and, left my mom at home, and we went all over the place. So we were gym rats at an early age.
What was that like having your dad be your coach?
It was fantastic. My dad was a fantastic coach, one of my biggest mentors. Not without challenges. Anybody that's ever played for a parent knows that you have that dynamic as well. But one of the most significant building blocks for me.
And when you say dynamic, are you referring to your dad setting the bar high for you?
Yes. I mean, my father was definitely not a helicopter parent or coach. He didn't expect us to go on and get scholarships for the rest of our life. But what he did demand is that if we were committed to a sport, basketball or other, that we gave in 100%.
And what's the impact of that lesson today?
It's the intensity. It's the commitment that I showed. I remember my dad leaving during snowstorms to drive 2 hours into northern Pennsylvania to scout basketball teams that he wasn't going to play for other 2 months. Because he didn't want his assistant coaches to have to do that with families. So I remember those types of stories, and that commitment to his craft, to his passion.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, Tony. So we've gathered you inherited a bit of that intensity from your dad. How young were you when you knew you had some of that in you?
I mean, the entrepreneurial experience for me and that combined with that intensity, I think has been there for me for as long as I can remember. I always wanted to get that first job. I was a paper carrier when I was maybe 9 years old, which my mom helped me bundle the newspapers and then still worked a full-time job as a secretary. So, as long back as I can remember.
And you told us a story about showing that intensity in sports, something with your glasses when you were young. What was that?
When I may have been in third grade, and if anybody remembers, before contacts there were rec specs. I don't know, like you remember Kurt Rambis for the Lakers back in the day.
Big ones.
Well, I was third grade for me, and I didn't even have rec specs, and I just remember losing a basketball game in third grade. I look at my kids now and think, really, is that such a big deal? But it was life or death to me at that point that a kid that was older than me beat me, and I remember breaking my glasses and crying into them.
And was it after that game that you were talking about your mom comforting you in the car? Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's what my mom. I think that's the balance. My dad, obviously, very comforting individual as well. But everybody has a mother, and she was right there for me in that moment to make me see maybe the bigger picture. The bigger picture, and I think that certainly carried with me for a long time.
And you talked about your dad going and scouting teams and having game films. And you said there were 2 TVs where you could watch your games. Tell me about the 2 TVs and what the choice was.
Yeah, we were in high school. We had 2 TVs. They weren't big, either one of them. But because my dad was the coach, we had the game film. And we would come home from games. And, my dad said to me, listen, if you want to celebrate yourself, go downstairs and watch it with your mom. And if you want to get better, sit up here and watch it with me.
Which did you choose?
Depends on what game I had, good or bad.
Explain that further. For a good game, did you go to your mom or your dad?
Good game, I sit with my dad. Bad game, mom. There was plenty of those.
And what's that got to do with how you're running your business today?
Well, I think that, what they've taught me is that I am super comfortable. I hope if you ask, my teammates that I work with acknowledging my own faults. I think it's a very difficult trait that you find in individuals. It's really hard to put the mirror on yourself. And I was raised in an environment, playing college football as well. You watch yourself, you play out. I say it all the time. Can you imagine if as employees every day you were filmed doing your job? And then on Monday in front of the rest of your team, your teammates, your employees, you get to review it and you never focus on the good things. You only focus on the things that you need to get better at, and that just, it doesn't happen in the business world, but I think at least it's helped me acknowledge my own weaknesses and being super comfortable with them because the list is long and distinguished.
So you're saying you run the company, imagining the game that the camera's on you the whole time for someone to review it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm absolutely more than comfortable in anybody that I work for, my teammates on a daily basis, being able to trust me enough to say, I think you could do this better. Cool. It's good for me.
Tony, in the green room, the importance of advocating for your clients came up. I'm curious, how young were you when you first advocated for someone besides yourself?
Well, I have a younger brother. Anybody that has a younger sibling knows that, I think the saying goes, it's like, I can punch my brother, but you can't. So I think that's certainly, was the case for me early on. And then, I gravitated towards, being leader captain of the sports teams that I played on. And, it puts you in a position where you want to advocate for the people that are in the trenches with you.
Mm-hmm. And what does it mean to advocate for your clients today?
Well, we represent almost $500 million in health insurance spend, and that's the financial end of it. But healthcare is a very human experience. So you have employees and their families that have to navigate a very complicated U.S. healthcare system. And we have a fully staffed customer service departments on the phone every day helping them, because the last thing that you need when you go through something traumatic is to open up a stack of bills that says you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. There needs to be somebody there to support you on a human level.
Mm-hmm. Tony, you mentioned earlier that you're working really hard and you're very competitive. And have you ever won any awards?
Most of the awards from a BSI perspective, like we celebrate in mass. So we recently named to the Inc. 5000 list nationally. Here in Pennsylvania, 8 years in a row, fastest growing. I was recently recognized this year. I got recognized as a community service person of the year, and that award's coming my way in Thanksgiving. It's very humble to receive it. Very much a team award for all the work that my team at BSI does.
Drew, there was something earlier that you were talking to Tony about with his brother and on the same team. What was that about?
There's two interesting stories you told. One was when you and your dad sat in the car and kind of cried over a lost game because you didn't get to play. And your dad knew if he played you, he probably would have won, but he wanted to be fair. And then the other was the impact of being on a team with your brother in college and how impactful and meaningful that was to you. And I'm just curious, like, why were those moments so meaningful? What's that tell us about you?
Well, I think sports is a bond for our family, obviously. And, we lived and breathed it together. But it really was the nucleus. Everything was surrounding, what we were doing as a family that way. And, I think, we've used sports in the most positive way to be able to build character over time. And playing college football with my brother, and we were both linebackers side by side. It wasn't just on the field that it brought me closer together, but my full family. We didn't have to divide on weekends. Everybody went to the same games. And that's been a lifetime of difference.
Didn't your brother sort of sacrifice to make that happen as well?
Yeah, my brother's first team All-State, probably could have been a 1AA Division II player. I went to Wilkes University's Division III. And we may have had a hand in recruiting him when he was in high school. So he was, he was recruited properly.
Yeah, you guys stick together.
Yeah, we were very, very, very close family. My brother is actually the global head of partnerships for Johnny Walker. He lives in Amsterdam, and he's been there for 6 years with his family. He's actually coming home. He's moving back to Manhattan. So we're going to get the gang back together soon.
Drew, what were you picking up? So basically, your ability, Tony, to have this intensity and this closeness with your brother and to win together, how's that affecting your building this business? Are you one of these guys that builds a really core team that's really competitive together?
We extremely loyal team members, and I definitely have built this culture where we've grown a business from scratch. And the way I talk about my teammates is they act every day like their name's on the door.
Perfect.
In a positive way.
Website address for the organization?
BSIcorporate.com.
We've been speaking with Tony DeRay, CEO of BSI Corporate Benefits here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, executiveleadersradio.com. And please stick around. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Chris Pruitt, President and CEO of East Penn Manufacturing. Chris, what is East Penn Manufacturing? What kind of stuff are you guys doing?
East Penn Manufacturing is a privately owned company, and we make automotive, forklift, and reserve power batteries, and we are one of the largest privately owned battery manufacturers in the world.
How large or how small is the team?
10,400 wonderful employees.
Whoa, that's a huge business. And how old is this business?
Approximately 75 years old.
Where are you from originally, and how many brothers and sisters?
Grew up in central New Jersey, a town called North Plainfield. I'm in the middle. I have a younger sister and an older brother.
Okie dokie. And how young were you when you took something the next step, like you took this business the next step? How young were you when you took something the next step?
Recall, I played your traditional baseball, basketball, football, and I played a lot of Pop Warner football. And Pop Warner, as a 10-year-old, was fairly intimidating for me. You have those really, really hard practices in the heat of the summer or at night. And I spent a lot of time as a teammate really trying to coach up and help my teammates, because you could get pretty down sometimes during practice. Mm-hmm. And I would really try to take them to the next level.
Tony, what are you thinking?
Chris, I was just thinking, how do you transfer something like that to lifting up 10,500 employees? How does that work?
Well, no doubt it's a large company, but every employee here is an individual. And when I'm out on the plant floor, I identify everybody as individuals and I try to talk to them. I try to listen to their concerns. Because even though we're making batteries, what we do each and every day, we're affecting families and families' lives. And that is really, really important that I try to relate to the employees.
Matthew?
And coach them up.
Chris, when you talk about sports and you talk about the company, I get a real sense of humility from you. How young were you when you kind of learned that lesson of humility?
When I was growing up, from a very early age, I witnessed people, not in my family, but outside of my family. I witnessed mean people. I witnessed ornery people. And I say, man, I never want to go through life like that. Mm-hmm. And so when I make a mistake, I admit I make a mistake. When I'm happy, I like to show happiness.
And when you talked about it in sports, was there a coach who was particularly important in teaching you that stuff?
There was a coach that I keep referring to, Pop Warner, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Goldberg. I forget his first name, but he was a guy that really provided some wisdom. When you were down, he'd help you. When you needed a kick.
How would he do that? How would he do that?
He would when you did something good, he'd pat you on the back, and when you did something bad, he'd tell you that you did something bad. And you know what? Honesty is the best policy.
And with that whole kind of humility thing, you had an older brother. Tell me about your older brother. Does that play a part in the humility too?
Yeah, my older brother was really, really good athlete and very smart. And I would characterize myself as a mediocre athlete and mediocre intelligence. And so he really helped me to become a little bit more self-aware and also to become competitive, because I always wanted to be better. I always wanted to try to be like him, not in a negative way, but it pushed me to do better. And we always need to push ourselves, whether it's personally or professionally.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Chris, how about mom and dad? Can you tell us about your parents?
Grew up in a two working parent family. Dad was an engineer in New York City, and mother was a pediatric nurse, and both played a pretty big influence on my life.
And didn't you say your dad traveled quite a bit just to get to work every day?
Yep, he traveled 2 to 2.5 hours into the city and out of the city every day into the World Trade Center, then walked 4 blocks to his company.
What did that mean to you that your dad was doing that every day for the family?
It taught me what it was to sacrifice and hard work. And being a CEO of a company is hard work. Being a battery maker is hard work. And hard work is in my blood.
When you're faced with a tough decision at the office, what do you hear your father telling you?
Be calm, be cool, but also be decisive and listen, get input before you open your big mouth, Chris.
Shannon.
Chris, earlier we talked about the importance of giving back, and just to name a few, you've been involved in the Children's Home of Reading, YMCA, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and you mentioned that your parents showed you the importance of volunteering when you were growing up. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I recall very vividly how involved my dad was. My dad was not a coach, but he was an administrator of the Pop Warner Football League, and he spent endless hours volunteering for that organization. So at a very early age, I saw my father, as well as my mother. She was also involved in some of the Pop Warner activities. So I saw them giving back at a very early age. And then not so much in high school and college, a little bit, but when I started working at my first job out of college, the managing partner of that firm was extremely supportive of being involved. And I always felt it was the right thing to do ever since I've been working. And I get a lot of enjoyment about giving back to the community. And it's been a great part of my professional career. And I've learned a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean you've learned a lot?
I was on a board of a non-for-profit, Big Brothers Big Sisters. I was on that board at 22 years of age. I didn't really know what a board was and how it operated. So that has helped me as I have progressed in my professional career to understand the governance and really what a board does. And so I've been able to give back, but the non-for-profits have also been able to give back. And I'm a better human being for it, personally and professionally.
Chris, has the organization ever won any awards?
So yes, East Penn has won a lot. I'll give two specifics. One is for the last 18 out of 19 years, we've been one of the best places to work in PA. Mm-hmm. And the last 2 years, we've been one of the top companies in the Forbes best privately held companies in the U.S.
So this organization of over 10,000 people, and it says on this piece of paper here, you're the president and CEO. You're a real hot dog. I mean, you must have fun sitting in your office, having long lunches, coming in at 10 o'clock, cocktails for lunch, leaving at 4 o'clock, flying in your jet, right?
Quite the opposite. So before I came here this morning, I was out in one of our plants at 7:15, touring the plant, talking to our wonderful employees. I tend to, in fact, I hate signing my title as CEO president. I sign my title as Chris Pruitt because I am no different than anybody else. I get up in the morning, put my pants on, and come to work and try to better the company and our employees.
Do you have a big parking space when you pull up to the plant right next to the door so you don't have to get cold or wet or snow that says the boss?
No, in fact, when I went to our plant this morning, I parked where everybody else parks.
Why do you do that?
Because I'm no different.
Matthew, what are you thinking?
Earlier, Herb, during an earlier interview, you asked someone else a question about instincts, and you kind of suggested they shouldn't or weren't part of business. And Chris, I noticed you laugh at that when Herb asked that question about instincts. What was that about?
So, absolutely. When you are, Matt, accounting is accounting or whatever, engineering is engineering, but every company is made up of employees and they're human beings. And when you're dealing with human beings, it's not a mathematical equation. You need to understand their heartbeat. And that's what it's about.
Didn't you tell us you started at this business a number of years ago as the controller?
Yes.
But that's all about the numbers, isn't it?
It's about exactly right. But the reason why I'm the CEO of this company is because I have a heart and I care about the people. And it's what it's all about.
Heart and you care about that's what you were talking about very early when we asked you about how young were you when you were helping build up a team. That's what you were bringing to the team as a young kid was the heart, not necessarily the numbers. Am I right about that?
Yes. I mean, listen, you can buy the machinery, you can buy the drafting tables, you can buy the pencils and pens, right. But it's all about the people making it work.
What's the website address for East Penn Manufacturing?
EastPennManufacturing.com.
We've been speaking with Chris Pruitt, President and CEO of East Penn Manufacturing. Matthew, can you give us a rundown of who we've had on the air today, please?
I sure can. It's been a great show. We started off with Kip Anthony, the President and CEO of EFE. Then we had Bob Dick, the President of Precis Engineering. We also had Tony DeRay, CEO of BSI Corporate Benefits. And just now we wrapped up with Chris Pruitt, the President and CEO of East Penn Manufacturing.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, and Matthew Shapiro Obermeyer for giving me a hand structuring the questions. Hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for listening today. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.